Hello everybody, my name's Leah and I'm the owner of Not a Chores Creative here in the UK. For my first YouTube video, I wanted to put together a little reference video of a large proportion of the chenille yarns that are available here in the UK. So the reason for this video is when I first started crochet last year, I thought that all chenille yarns were the same. Well, I was wrong, because when you get something like Ricorumi, it is not the same as something like Chenille Love, like I thought it was. So if you're very new to crochet and you want to start working with chenille yarns for amigurumis / plushies, this is the video for you. So just a few points about this video. First off, this isn't a comprehensive list. I haven't managed to get hold of every single chenille yarn that's available to the UK. I've got about 20 to discuss in this video, and I would not expect you to sit through all 20. If you do, please grab yourself a cup of tea because it's going to be a very long video because I'm not very good at getting to the point very quickly. What I have done to ensure that you guys can skip through is each chenille yarn should have a timestamp on it that you can just flick to. I've also put together a Google Documents list, which the link can be found below. So in that spreadsheet there is a list of all 20 of the yarns and a breakdown of some of the things that I go through in this video. Obviously you can find one on there that you might like and then come back to this video if you want to see it in more detail, because what I have done as well is for every single yarn I've made a little octopus just to illustrate what it was like to work with the yarn, because it's okay just kind of touching and feeling the skein, but what is it actually like to work with? That's the main part of it. So pick a yarn and come back to this video when you found something. The second part is, whilst the list is primarily chenille yarns, I've also included things like blanket yarns, like YarnArt Blanket. And the reason for that is often when we search for chenille yarns, blanket yarns come up, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell from the images that are online whether they are chenille or blanket, so I have put a couple of rogue ones in. Thirdly, this video isn't sponsored at all. I've gone out of my way to buy all of these yarns for the purpose of this video and for these reviews. I will say that I try and keep my opinions very neutral when I'm reviewing these yarns. The review is more just to talk about the technicalities of the yarn, but my personal opinion does come in when it came to working with the yarns to make the little octopus, because I wanted to get a general feel of how they felt when you're working with them on the crochet hook, but also whether they snag, what their texture feels like. Occasionally I may or may not say that I like the yarn or not, or whether I'd probably buy it again, but please note that that's my personal opinion based off the way that I work with yarns, and that might not be the same for you, henceforth why I've tried to keep this video as neutral as possible. Finally, I really hope you enjoy this video. If you do have any comments, questions, or want to give some feedback or suggestions for another video, please do let me know in the comments below, because I'm always looking to review different types of yarn, for example, or do other videos in regards to crochet or other art methods that I use. I am planning to do a similar video like this for fur yarns, because that is a type of yarn that's kind of up and coming in popularity. I have started to put together a list of fur yarns for that, and that will come in the next probably a couple of months, because I've got a new job starting soon. But yeah, hope you enjoy this video. Any questions, do let me know, and grab yourself a cup of tea and buckle in. I also quickly wanted to jump in and just talk about a word that I'm going to use a lot, which is called strand consistency. I don't think that's a technical term, but that's what I used in my review. And that refers to kind of how fluffy the strand is, so how thick does it feel. The other thing is this review goes in size of strand order, so basically how thick the strand is, starting from the smallest up until the biggest, which is the blanket yarn. So the first yarn in our review series is Rico Design's Ricorumi Nilli. Now this is a yarn that I use so often for a lot of my smaller intricate amigurumis. A really good example is one that I made recently, which is this strawberry cow plant. I will zoom in closer, by the way. My camera's not the best, it's very old, so it doesn't autofocus. And I just love this design, and this was made solely with the Nilli. Now there are 30 colours of the Nilli, and you get about 65 metres per skein, and that weighs about 25 grams, so you get quite a lot for your money in this. In terms of the price, I get it from a local yarn shop for about £1.50. Online you can pick it up for between about £1.40 and £2 depending. In terms of the hook that I would use with this, so here is my little octopus that I made with it. I used a 2.5mm hook for this, but I can get down to about a 1.5 to a 3mm. Anything smaller, it does make it difficult and not as enjoyable. Anything more and you get a lot of holes with it. It does shed, but very minimal. and it's just because it's so fine to work with. So one of the real big positives with the Ricorumi Nilli is that it does have the relevant certificates for the UKCA certification. So if you are wanting to sell your plushies in the UK, then this is one that you can use. In terms of the feel of the yarn, it has a sheen finish to it for starters. It's very fine and it's a very unique yarn in the sense that it's designed for more smaller intricate work. It has very good strand consistency considering the size of it. Occasionally it does snag, so when I first started working with this yarn, it took me a while and it definitely snapped a couple of times. But once I kind of got my tension correct with it and did some practice, it's a lot slicker on my crochet hook now. Similar yarns, the closest I could find in the UK is the Sidar Happy Chenille. I find that the Ricorumi is a lot more slick on the hook and it just overall feels a lot better kind of quality than the Sidar. I'm not saying that that's in terms of the material that it's used, I'm talking in terms of quality to work with. So this was a lot more enjoyable than say the Sidar. So this yarn is quite widely available in the UK. Like I say, I buy it from my local yarn shop, but there are a lot of small businesses online that you can buy from. You can find those names in my Google Sheets, but it is stocked in a lot of places, which is great to know. In summary, I love the Ricorumi Nilli. I would recommend this to anybody for those really small intricate projects. It's very smooth on the hook, it has great strand consistency, lovely colour range. I don't really have anything bad to say about this one because I love working with it so much. But yeah, definitely a big recommendation from me. The next yarn we're going to review is the Sidar Happy. Now, this is very, very similar to the Ricorumi Nilli, but there are slight differences which I'll go into detail about. There are 25 colours in this yarn, and per skein you get 15 grams and 38 metres of the yarn, which is kind of okay. If you're doing a more intricate project, you probably want a little bit more than that. So if you are buying this yarn for a big intricate project, I would probably buy 2 skeins of everything. It's made of polyester, and in terms of cost, I found some online for 60p, obviously excluding delivery, but some ranged up to £2. Hook size, when I was making the octopus, I again used a 2.5mm hook and I found it okay. I wouldn't probably go any lower than a 2 because it snagged a lot. And again, this is a personal experience with it, but I did go on Facebook. I did buy this big box just to check it wasn't unique to this one skein that I bought online, but I had the same issue with a few of them. Maybe like the Ricorumi, I just need to get more practice in with this yarn, but I couldn't do a magic ring. And when I can't do a magic ring about 10 times over, it gets a little bit frustrating. So I ended up doing the chain 2 method. I might just need a bit more practice with that, but that was the only thing that I was like, if I'm going to use this yarn, I probably won't use any smaller than a 2mm hook because of the snagging, and I probably won't go any bigger than say 3.5 at a push, just because it's most likely to have those gaps in it and not be as tight for Amigurumi. This yarn does definitely shed, I'll put a little video in. And the other thing is that I couldn't find any UKCA relevant certificates for this yarn, so I would probably go to say that it isn't UKCA certified at the moment. However, in your own searches, obviously, which I recommend, you might find the relevant certificates for that. In terms of its feel, like the Nilli, it has that chenille feel to it, but I'd say the chenille was just a little bit more finer, so it felt a bit more velvet, whereas this one feels a bit more soft. But it does have great strand consistency. Like I say, it does snag a lot, but it felt okay on the hook. It just wasn't as smooth as say the Nilli. In terms of comparable brands, again, the only one that I could come across in the UK was the Ricorumi Nilli, and I feel like they're quite unique in their own ways, but are still very similar. So I wouldn't necessarily be able to interchange between the two brands when I'm making an Amigurumi, but it's still very nice to work with. It does have a slight sheen to it, but I'd say it's a lot more matte compared to the Ricorumi. And in terms of its availability, there are some shops that stock it in the UK. It's not something that I come across very often. Like I say, you can visit the Google Sheets and I've specified some yarn shops that stock this, but it seems to be quite widely available. And mostly you can get big boxes like this. Like I say, I got this for £10 off Facebook Marketplace, which I think is a great deal for 25 little skeins. But overall, I would say that the yarn is very nice to work with in its own way. I think I need a little bit more practice with it to get that kind of smoothness on my hook. It does shed, it does snag quite a bit, but again, it's quite unique in its own way and it's great for those intricate projects, and it does have quite a nice colour range. So the next yarn we're going to go over is YarnArt Dolce. Now we're going into the kind of more traditional chenille yarns. This is a yarn I use the most for pretty much all of my plushies that I make here in the UK, and that's one because there's a huge colour range, so there's 64 different colours available in this, including variegated colours, so great for chickens, and you get a lot for your money as well. So you get 120 metres, 100 grams of this, and I buy from 2 small businesses that you can find on the Google Sheets. I pay between about £2.80 to £4 depending on the availability of each of these colours, so you get a lot for your money. And it's also very, very good quality. It has very much a more of a matte finish rather than a sheen. It has very good, very, very good strand consistency. It's very thick, it's very sturdy. It's quite smooth on the hook for kind of a thick chenille like this. I will say that it does snag, and a lot of people have problems with the magic ring with this one. I definitely do, and it varies kind of colour to colour, but once you get a bit more comfortable with it, you kind of find the little knacks with this. This does shed, which is the biggest downside of this yarn. So when I do make with this, it is literally all over my floor, and it does get a bit frustrating after a while. However, I have come to learn if I just burn the ends of it, makes better for working with. And that's probably my best advice for working with this yarn, especially because it sheds so much. In terms of a hook size with this, I usually use between a 4 and a 6. Anything smaller, it becomes quite difficult to work with. Anything bigger, you can get to probably a 6.5 actually, but anything bigger than that and you just have more holes with it, so it's not as tight for amigurumi. This is the little octopus that I made, and I make these on the regular because I sell these, and because I sell it, obviously that means it has the relevant certificates for the UKCA certification, and people do feedback that it's a really nice soft yarn to kind of cuddle with. Similar yarns that are available, definitely Hobbii Honey Bunny is very, very close to this, as is Premier Parfait, and I would say that the Parfait is just a slight bit better quality, and I only say that because the Parfait doesn't shed as much as the Dolce, but the Honey Bunny is very, very similar. But I'd say the Honey Bunny is slightly more of a glossy sheen finish, but there's not that much difference between them, so they're definitely the closest ones. Finally, in terms of its availability, this one is available from many, many places around the UK, which is why I use it a lot. I've mentioned some small businesses that I buy from, and that's available on my Google Sheets, but it's very widely available, and you can always find one colour in one shop that's maybe out of stock in the other, which is also why I like it. And I just love making amigurumis with this one. Like I say, probably slightly biased because I use it so much, but I haven't found anything that has the same colour range, the same price range, the same availability in the UK from amigurumis like this one. So for me, this is a big personal recommendation to anyone in the UK who is looking to use chenille yarn to make amigurumis. If you are struggling with the shedding, definitely burn those ends, and with the magic rings, if you find it does snag a lot, just do the chain 2 method or kind of get a little bit more practice in with it. I have a 70% success rate with the magic rings. I'm never going to get 100% because sometimes it snags so badly, but it's still one of my favourite yarns to work with. The next yarn we're going to review is Premier's Parfait Chunky, and wow, I have not used this yarn before. I bought it specifically for this video. I wish this was more widely available in the UK because I've been genuinely so impressed by this yarn. Like I said, this video isn't sponsored, and I've tried to keep my opinions very unbiased and neutral, but I have to say this by far is an incredible yarn and such good quality for that kind of traditional chenille feel. In terms of colour range, there's 53 colours available in this, and that's the ones I could see in the UK. You get 120 metres and 100 grams in each skein, and it's made of polyester. In terms of price, now I don't know what this is in the US, but in the UK, because it's imported, the price range is quite pricey. So the ones that I could find were between £6 and £8. Hook sizes for amigurumis, I used a size 5 for this one, and I would say in terms of hooks, you can get between a 4 and a 6/6.5. It's very comparable to the YarnArt Dolce. The difference is that this one feels just that slight bit better quality. By quality, I mean, it doesn't shed as much, but it still feels really good. It has a very good strand consistency, so it's very thick, very sturdy, very robust. It's very, very smooth on the hook considering the thickness of this, and doesn't snag very easily, which really took me by surprise. I will say that this is the only skein I've worked with, so whether it was just this one was just magical to work with, but I was so impressed by this. Like I say, in terms of shedding, very, very minimal. Could be linked to just this one particular skein, but I didn't really get any shed from it. it. It has more of a matte finish rather than a sheen to it. There is still a slight sheen to it, but I'd say this is the most matte of all the chenilles that I worked with. And in regards to comparable yarns, definitely the YarnArt Dolce is the closest one, as is Hobbie's Honey Bunny, but I would say that the Premier just trumps those two in terms of its quality. Going on to its availability, because it is imported from the US, there is very, very limited availability in the UK. I could only really find 2 or 3 small businesses that stocked this, and because of that, even though they stock all of the colours, they sell out very, very quickly, and it is slightly pricey. So availability is very limited in the UK, but you can get it. Overall, if this yarn was available in the UK, it would definitely be a staple in my collection. I was absolutely blown away by its quality and the feel of it and how nice it was to work with. Like I say, the only downside is the availability in the UK and the price of it because of that limited availability. So whilst I would recommend it, I wouldn't recommend it for your bank balance and having that consistent access to colours, but definitely a very, very good yarn. The next yarn we're going to review is Hobbie's Honey Bunny. Now, I've been so excited to try this yarn because I see so many people talk about it online, and I have to say it's definitely lived up to expectations. You can get 36 colours in this yarn, and you get about 120 metres per skein, which is about 100 grams, and it's made of polyester. Now, straight off the bat, what I will say are the 2 biggest downsides to this yarn is the price and availability, because you can only buy it from Hobbii itself, and if, like me, you're based in the UK, that means you have to import it to the UK, which can be quite frustrating because it can take a bit of time, and also it means you have to buy quite a number of skeins to kind of make it worthwhile. Moreover, it's very expensive in my opinion, so it's £7.10 per skein, and I just can't kind of justify that price because you need about 1 or 2 of these to make a good size amigurumi. So they're 2 negatives which are not related to the quality of the yarn, more just its accessibility for people based in the UK. Going on to the quality of this yarn, when I made my little octopus with it, I used a size 5mm hook, and I would say you could probably use a size 4 to probably a size 6.5mm hook for amigurumis, and it does shed, which was kind of a bit of a letdown considering the price of it. I just kind of expected it not to shed for that much, but it did shed. Not the end of the world, but for the price I probably would have expected it not to shed. It is very thick, very soft, very, very sturdy, and very good quality. It occasionally snagged when I was working with it, but I would kind of expect that working with a thick chenille, and it was very smooth on the hook, so that was a very big positive. In the UK, it does have the relevant certificates for UKCA certifications, so you can use this for your plushies, and overall I would say it's got more of a sheen to it rather than a matte, but I'd say it's probably in between a sheen and a matte, so it's very, very nice. Regarding the comparable yarns to this yarn, I would definitely say it is very, very, very close to YarnArt Dolce, to the point where I probably use it interchangeably because they're pretty much exactly the same in my honest opinion. So for me, I'd end up going for YarnArt Dolce because of the price and availability of it. However, if I did get my hands on some of this and it did come to the UK and it was a bit more readily available, I'd probably switch between the 2 of them because this has a very nice colour range. The other yarn I would definitely say it's very similar to is the Premier Parfait. Now, the Premier is definitely a better quality yarn, but like I say, they're both very limited compared to the Dolce, so I would always go for that one. I guess just to go over the availability again, you can only buy this from Hobbii itself, which can come with problems, especially if you, like me, would buy a big bulk of this to make the shipping worth the time and the money as well. I have heard people say that when they purchase big amounts of this at quite a high price, they have been stopped at customs, so it's just worth noting. I don't know how accurate those stories are, but I've heard a couple from different sources, so I would just be mindful of that when buying this. But overall, I have to say the quality of this yarn definitely lives up to the hype that it is online. I really like the colours that are available. I love the quality. I really enjoyed working with it. However, for me personally, based in the UK, price of it and the availability of it, well, the limited availability of it, kind of puts me off. But if you were going to do a big order of it, then it might be definitely worth your time. The next yarn in our review is Wolans Bunny Baby. Now, I've never come across this in person and I don't hear many people talk about it, but it is readily available in the UK. This has one of the biggest colour ranges of all the yarns in this list. There's 72 colours available in this, and that really took me by surprise, and some of the colours are really, really nice, so definitely good for a colour range. In terms of a skein, you get 120 metres and 100 grams, like a lot of the ones that I mentioned today. It's made of a super soft polyester, so it is slightly softer than things like the YarnArt Dolce, the Hobbii Honey Bunny, and also the Premier Parfait. Hook size, again, when I made my little octopus, I used a size 5mm hook, but as the other ones that are in the similar range, you can use probably a 4 to a 6.5mm hook. This one does shed again like the other ones in this range, but it does have the relevant certificates required for the UKCA certification, so you can use this for your plushies. Going on to the feel of this yarn, like I mentioned earlier, this is very soft. This is definitely a lot softer than similar yarns, and for that reason I really liked it. It was quite nice to work with something that's a little softer, I guess. Because of that, it was very, very slick on the hook and didn't snag, which was a huge positive. In terms of its feel, this one is very, very soft compared to the other yarns that I would say are very similar, like the Premier or the Dolce. Because of that, I really enjoyed working with it. It was quite a new feeling for me. It's a little bit sheenier and a little bit fluffier than the other yarns in the range, and I will stick a little snippet in here just to illustrate what I mean by fluffier, because that could mean anything really. In terms of comparable yarns, like I say, definitely the YarnArt Dolce, definitely the Premier Parfait, definitely the Hobbii Honey Bunny, just by its consistency in its strands, but compared to those ones, it's definitely more sheeny and definitely a little bit fluffier in terms of its strands. What I will say is this one's starting to branch into slightly softer yarns, which I'm going to go on to in the next couple of videos, so I would say it's also quite close to HMBB Caterpillar and also King Cole Yummy, which is quite nice because I haven't found anything similar to those ones yet, so definitely good in terms of comparison. I wouldn't be able to interchange this with any of the yarns that I mentioned, I don't feel, because it's quite unique in its fluffiness, but it's still very, very nice to work with. Finally, availability. I could find this in quite a few places in the UK, and like I say, they're listed on the Google Sheets, and a lot of these websites had the varied colours, which again took me by surprise at this 72. Overall, I was really, really happy with this yarn, really took me by surprise. It was nice to work with something that was a bit unique in itself, and like I say, it has a massive colour range, which is great for amigurumis. It's very smooth on the hook, very soft compared to similar yarns, and it just turned out to make a nice little octopus, so definitely would recommend. So the next couple of yarns, and I would say definitely including the Wolans Bunny Baby, are a lot softer chenille yarns. The next one we're going to discuss is King Cole's Yummy. Now this is one that I use a lot specifically for my little chickens. I'm a big fan of my chickens. It comes in 44 colours, and in terms of the technical aspects of this yarn, per skein you get 120 metres and 100 grams, and it's made of that polyester. Price wise, it ranges between £3.90 to £4.90. Hook sizes, I would say this one can go between a 4 and 6 again, but you probably could go slightly a bit smaller than Premier or YarnArt. So for my little octopus, I actually used a 4mm hook, and that's something that I use a lot with this yarn because I find it's quite slick to work with. This yarn occasionally does snag, especially when you're doing your magic ring, but once it's on the hook again, it's quite smooth. It does also shed quite a lot, I will say, but on a positive, like I say, I use it for my chickens, so it does have the relevant certificates for UKCA certification. The finish on this is more of a slight sheen, however, it's got that fluffier look, and I would definitely say the closest comparable yarn to this one is the Wolans Bunny Baby. However, I would say this one is just that tiny, tiny little bit thinner than Wolans. Probably couldn't interchange them because the Wolans is still slightly fluffier in its strands than the Yummy, but they're still very similar yarns. Finally, just to go back over the availability of this yarn, I buy it from my local yarn shop, and it's definitely readily available on multiple shops online. Overall, I work with this yarn. I really recommend this yarn. I love working with this yarn, and I like how accessible and available it is. It's something that I would definitely recommend, and yeah, definitely a very, very good yarn. The next yarn we're going to talk about is HMBB's Caterpillar yarn. Now this is another yarn that I've been really excited to try, but it's often sold out online, so I'm very excited to be able to actually have one in my hand. I think there's about 10 colours in this range, but I couldn't find out for sure, and this range has only recently been released, so I do hope with its success that more colours will be released. It is only available on HMBB's website, so it's difficult to get a hold of. Like I say, it's always sold out, but I can definitely see why. In each skein you get about 120 metres, so 100 grams, and it's made of micropolyester, so it's exceptionally soft. Price wise, it's so reasonable considering how good quality it is. So it's £3.25 direct from HMBB website, and obviously you add shipping onto that. For amigurumis, when I made my little octo, I used a size 4mm, and I would say in terms of hooks for amigurumi, probably a 4 to a 6. you could maybe get to a 6.5. However, I feel that because it's just slightly thinner, maybe you'd end up with a few more gaps in your yarn, but it's worth trying out. This yarn does shed, unfortunately, however, not as much as say other comparable yarns, and because it is a newer yarn, it doesn't have those certificates that will make it UKCA certified. However, again, because it is a newer yarn, maybe as it grows in popularity, HMBB will look at getting those certificates in place, because I would happily sell plushies made of this yarn. It is so soft. The feel of this yarn, it's still very thick, maybe like I say, not as thick as Dolce, but it is very, very, very soft. And I would say it's quite comparable to Jellybaby from Cygnet in terms of its softness. The strand consistency is very good. It did not snag, which meant it was a dream to work with, and it was very slick on the crochet hook, which was obviously a welcome for myself making this little octo. The finish on this yarn is also more of a sheen, as you can kind of see as I hold it up to the light. Comparable yarns, I definitely say the closest is probably Cygnet Jellybaby, and I would go that based on the softness. And then also King Cole's Yummy, but I'd say King Cole is slightly more of a rougher compared to this yarn, but they're still both very, very soft. Finally, just going back round to the availability, this is only available from HMBB themselves, so it's not easy to get hold of, and it does sell out very, very quickly. But because of the quality, I can completely understand why that happens. You can definitely tell this yarn has been designed by someone who knows what they're wanting out of a yarn, because if this was more available and had a few more colours, I would buy more of this. It was a dream to work with, so a big recommendation from me. The next yarn I'm going to be discussing is Wollbiene Softy. Now, apologies in advance if I have absolutely butchered the pronunciation of that name. Do let me know in the comments below. But this was another yarn that took me by complete surprise by just how nice it was to work with. This yarn is very, very soft. It is made of micropolyester, and per skein you do get 120 meters and 100 grams. Colours available in this yarn I would question, because I found about 15 available in the UK, but then again I did really struggle to find any shops that stock this, and that suggests to me that either this is being discontinued for whatever reason, and if that is the case, that's a real shame, because this was a really nice yarn to work with. For the amigurumi that I made, the little octo, I used a size 4mm hook, and I would say that I would use between a 4 and a 6mm hook. I probably wouldn't go any further than a 6, only because I have a feeling that there would be more holes in it because it is slightly thinner than things like Dolce. From a price perspective, it was quite cheap. It was £3.80 to £4.80 depending on what was available, but again, circling back to the availability, I could not find more than probably one colour of one skein available on an odd website, so probably not something that's going to be available anytime soon. This was another yarn that did shed, and unfortunately it does not have any UKCA relevant certifications, which means you probably wouldn't be able to use this for selling plushies in the UK. Going over its feel, like I said, it's so soft, and I would say the softness is comparable to HMBB's Caterpillar. There was very good strand consistency, it feels very good quality, and it was very slick on the crochet hook and didn't snag, which is a huge positive. I would also say that the finish on this one is more of a sheen compared to other yarns, however that could just be the colour that I've chosen. I find with lighter colours they tend to come up more sheeny, but then when I look at the darker colours of something, they're not as sheeny, they're more matte, so take that with a pinch of salt. Overall, like I say, I was really taken back by this yarn. I was really impressed by the quality of it and how nice it was to work with. Unfortunately, I couldn't find many other skeins of this yarn available online, so that does kind of suggest that maybe it's being discontinued. However, if you can find more yarns of this, I definitely would recommend it. If you are watching this and you find it readily available in your country or wherever you're based, give it a go, because it was an absolute dream to work with. It is a little bit thinner than other comparable chenille yarns, but it is so soft. Wish I could work with this one again. Unfortunately, it's just not that available for me. Completely forgot to add these clips in, but here's just a comparison of the three of them together. As you can see, they're quite similar, but also quite unique in their own way. And here's the cute little octos that I made using all three of these yarns. The next yarn in our review series is Cygnet Jellybaby. For me, this is a yarn that I started working with when I first got into crochet with plushies, and I have to say it was definitely a firm favourite when I started. It is such a soft yarn. So it's made of super soft polyester, and per skein you get about 120 meters and 100 grams, and there are about 24 colors in the range, which the colors themselves are very vibrant. It's a really nice looking yarn. It's exceptionally soft. I would say that comparably it's as soft as, say, HMBB's Caterpillar or Wollbiene Softy. However, I would say this is the softest, but I feel like when I say that, I said that about all of the other ones, but because the softness is so marginal between them, some days I'll feel and I'll be like, yep, that's definitely the softest, and then another day I'll feel like the other one's the softest. So in terms of its price, it varies between about £3.80 and £4.80, and I found that change depending on the colour availability. Because it's quite popular in the UK, it does sell out quite quickly, but it is available in a lot of places. It does have the relevant certificates to be UKCA certified, so you can make and sell plushies using this yarn. A big downside to this yarn, as with many of them in this list, is that it does shed. Here's a little clip of my boyfriend pulling the yarn. He was not impressed. Going over hook size, I used a 4mm hook for this one, similar to the King Cole Yummy, and it's very slick on the crochet hook. Is probably the biggest positive to this yarn, and it was really nice to work with, and it's super soft. In terms of hook sizes, I would say between probably a 4 and a 6. I wouldn't go any further than a 6 like other yarns that are similar to this one, just because I feel like it'll be a bit holy in the Amigurumis. But like I say, my little Octos turned out really nice with the 4mm hook. Going back over to how it feels, it's a super soft yarn. The strands are very thick, but in terms of its strand consistency, I would say it's not as thick as other yarns, but I think that's probably what gives it that softness. It does have a slight, in fact, I say slight, it definitely does have a sheen to this one. It's probably one of the shiniest yarns out of all the yarns we're looking at today. It's very slick on the crochet hook, as I mentioned. However, it does snag quite a bit, but like I say, once you get going, it's very slick. Just rounding back around to the yarns that are very comparable to this one, definitely HMBB's Caterpillar and Wollbiene Softy. And just going back to its availability, this one is widely available in the UK. If you go onto the Google Sheets, I've named a couple of smaller businesses that sell this, but also you can pick it up in a lot of high street yarn shops, which is a huge positive for this yarn. In summary, I really like this yarn. I just don't use it that often because the yarns that I do use have a wider colour range, but it's definitely one that I would recommend if you're looking for something that's widely available, quite cheap to buy, and also has that nice sheen to it. It's really nice for making amigurumis with, so definitely a big plus from me. We are now 10 yarns through and halfway through this entire video. Unfortunately, I've got to this point and realised that my iMovies will crash if I try and upload any more videos, and that is because my Mac has run out of storage. So whilst I wanted to do this video in 1 hour long episode, unfortunately I'm gonna have to do it in 2 parts. So this is part 1 for anybody who's watching. If you have been following through all the way through with me, thank you so much, and I really hope you're enjoying it and you're learning a lot about the different yarns. If you would like to check out part 2, I have put a direct link below. Please understand that was not my intention to do 2 parts, just a little bit limited on storage and technicalities, so my apologies for this, but yeah, check out link 2 below.